So if someone is wanting to come in and do an acquisition, what are some of the things they should consider?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is,
So Shane, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and the name of your company?
hello, Eric. Yeah, my name's Shane McCall. I'm with Co-Prince McCall Potroff LLC. And I also run our blog, smallgovcon.com. So we're a boutique law firm. We focus on federal contracting. We work with clients all around the country, a lot of small business clients, a lot of small business matters, but we also work with some larger businesses as well.
Nice.
And yeah, and then our
Oh,
blog, yeah,
I'm
Small
sorry.
GovCon. That's a really good resource for our readers and also our clients, just to stay up to date on um, small business matters, federal contracting matters, new cases, new regulatory updates, and we also have a lot of good information on recurring topics, like teaming agreements or the 8A program or joint ventures and things like that. So we try to keep it very easy to understand, very easy to read, new things that are coming out and recurring things that can help out businesses that are just getting started in the federal contracting space.
No, I love that. And I can tell you personally that I've used Small GovCon along my journey as a resource when I'm trying to make a point or justify something. I Google it and then I type in Small GovCon afterwards, right? It's I'll say, hey, what's this court case? One of the ones that I constantly look up often is uh, there was a hearing where they talked about the shrinking industrial base and the spending. And so, like, I always reference that article that you guys have up, and it has different dates and years. So it goes back to the first time they had a conversation about it, like in 2018. And then, or if it comes to requirements like NIST or CMMC, I could find articles talking about that back 6, 7 years ago. So,
Oh yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, as an attorney, you can't remember all these things, and of course, you can go look them up. You can look at some cases, but we use the blog. Our attorneys do because it's a quicker way of like having all these updates and laws and cases indexed, and you can say, I remember writing a blog about that a couple months ago. It's quicker than trying to find a case or something like that. And then we can also, so, we have either a client or just somebody. We get people reaching out to us all the time. Maybe they don't want to become a client, and we say, oh, here's a good resource for you. Check out this blog. And they get some information, they go away happy. And sometimes they come back and they need a little more help, and we help them out.
no, I
So
love that. I love that. I love that. And so again, it's just looking at the website, Small GovCon. You mentioned in the beginning some of the areas that you specialize in is teaming arrangements, joint ventures, as they affect small businesses.
mhm. Yeah, that's maybe one of our bread and butter things that we help people with. Joint venture agreements. Say you got a small business that wants to work with another small business. Maybe it's a 8A company working with a small business or a service disabled veteran-owned small business company. They want to join forces, collaborate, and both kind of be the joint prime contractor in a joint venture. There's quite a few hurdles and regulation requirements that you got to jump through to have a compliant joint venture agreement. So somebody in our office is probably drafting a joint venture agreement or reviewing one every day of the business week, and hopefully not too much on weekends, but every once in a while. And that's something that we help people with all the time. Yeah, and it can be very powerful. I mean, it seems like a lot of agencies are looking for that nice blend of two companies, and they're kind of combining their resources, combining their capabilities, having that experience and kind of getting the strength of two in one joint venture.
Interesting. Is Are you seeing? Well, let's go back. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing so I've been an attorney since 2010. I've been doing the federal contracting legal area since 2017,
Okay.
and kind of took over this firm in late 2021. So I've been running it with my partner Nicole Potroff since then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, how are you mentioned that the government likes seeing the joint ventures. Um, were you before you took over the firm and before you were actually doing government contracts law, were you actually familiar? I mean, were you in the same area of expertise in terms of the law or no?
No, I actually did bankruptcy law
Okay.
at a small firm in Kansas City for about 7 years. And then I knew a guy named Steve Coprance who founded this firm.
Hmm.
He originally worked in DC for some pretty large government contracting law firms out there. Wanted to, hang out a shingle, start his own firm, and decided to move to the Midwest. And I kind of knew him from different things and where I live, and there was an opening, and so I kind of just made a lateral move into the small business and federal contracting world and found it, compared to the bankruptcy practice, it's actually a lot more positive. Bankruptcy, as you might imagine, is can be kind of a downer at times. You're always dealing with people in crisis. Federal contracting, for a lot of our clients, it can be a really big positive, a win-win. We're kind of helping them position themselves and using the legal tools to market themselves. And so they can get big wins out of that. And they're very happy often with our services. So sometimes sometimes we're dealing with a little bit of crisis here and there, but a lot of the times it's a really positive environment. We have some really good interactions and feedback from our clients. So it's been really nice.
I enjoy that. So talk to me. We were kind of talking offline beforehand about some of the things that you're experiencing now with persons wanting to leave companies, maybe go start off their own companies. What are some of the concerns that either the person leaving or the company should have if they're in that type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a whole host of things, but one of the things that we focus on in a lot of our clients want to, be a small business federal contractor and conduct small business contracts or socioeconomic set-asides like the 8A program. And in that particular arena, like SBA is often looking at what are the connections between the newly formed company and the old company. So in like the size world, SBA calls that the newly organized concern rule. They're concerned about a larger company doing a spin-off, but still kind of controlling that new company. And so it's not really a small business. And kind of within the 8A program and certain other programs like the SDVOSB program, there's also concerns of that if you used to work for someone and then you go form your own company, if that old business or that old employer is still involved, there's a risk, or there's almost kind of an assumption on the part of the SBA that they may be kind of calling the shots or having a little too much control over that company. And with these socioeconomic programs, one of the watchwords is the company has to be controlled by the key individual. So when you're going from a company to starting a new one, you have to be aware of those restrictions and how closely you're going to be interacting with the old company. Because often, there's kind of a natural impulse. There's like a business that there's a just that company, their capabilities, they're a good company. So it's not like you want to totally close off your ability to work with them, but you have to do it in kind of a safe and controlled way. Because when we see people run into problems, it's usually because they haven't thought through or looked at some of those rules, and then they come to us when they're facing, a review by SBA or they're facing a protest. At that point, it's a lot harder to, you can't change things, can't change horses midstream. Of course, as attorneys, we do our best to, make an argument and cast it in the best light to our clients. But sometimes those things are easier to arrange and kind of restructure at the front end. So, okay, let's not do it this way because we may be concerned about too much control from that predecessor company.
What is the word that you said is used with the 8A program? Was it called the words that you used?
So for the affiliation rules with SBA, and I can kind of really briefly say affiliation is basically the idea that if two companies are affiliated, SBA is going to join their receipts together or join their employees together. And that's a very kind of big picture way to look at it. But within that, there's a whole set of rules. One of them is newly organized concern rule. I think
There you
that's
go. That's one of these. Yep.
that's the buzzword I was trying to
All right.
throw in there, but not kind of not lean on it too much.
All
Within
right.
the 8A program, though, it's and the SDVSB program has the same concept. They call it and they call it economic dependence, which is kind of an idea or like an example of that to kind of drive that home for people. Say you used to work for this company and you start your own, and the other company says, "Hey, we want to work with you. Here, use our facilities. You can have an office there. We'll give you a below market rent facility. Help you start out, right?
Mhm.
We'll give you kind of a whatever it is. Say it's one third of what you normally pay. SBA can then look at that and say, wait, you wouldn't really be able to start up your company unless you had this really nice facility, and you wouldn't be profitable unless you had it at below market rate. So therefore, we could say there's dependence on that company you used to work for. So it's a kind of an odd concept there. But so if you say, okay, well maybe we've checked, maybe we want to do, maybe some of them say, I don't even want to get close to that. I don't want to be in the office of this little company because let's just have it be real clean. Other people say, well, okay, what if I have them, check the market. What's the current going rate? Okay, we have a commercially reasonable lease. We follow the same terms. Maybe, and maybe that's okay. But it's best if you just sort of like think about all those things before you go too far down the road.
That's interesting that if I'm an employee and I leave a company that I would have to be concerned about that.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. And then sometimes we've represented the company that's the original company or the older company, and then
Right.
they if they want to work with that spin-off company, or maybe that's not the right word because it's not really a spin-off company, it's just a separate entity. But if they want to be careful on how they interact with them, okay, how can we work with them to avoid um, sort of inadvertently having them not be able to become an 8A company, for instance, or not be a small business,
Right.
that sort of thing.
And really, I think what we're missing that was not being said is that that only applies if they're a large business.
Yeah, generally it's going to be riskier if it's a large business. You could see it with a small business if 8A program SDV OSB one no small business doesn't have to be a large business. But if someone's not wanting to go after those categories of procurements, then they don't need to worry about those rules. Then it would just matter if there's a large business or the other one is if there's two small businesses, if they're found affiliated, it would push them over the size limit. So two like kind of
I got you. Okay.
largish
Right.
small businesses. Yeah, then you got to be worried about it too.
Right. Okay. Yeah. If the two small businesses were at close to where they combine their size, then they would be large, then that would be a concern.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, companies can have affiliates. They have affiliates all the time. It doesn't really matter. It's fine. A lot of you probably know this. Entrepreneurs, they may work in the federal contracting field and they may have side businesses as well. And those are
Sure.
all technically affiliates. They can have a lot of. I've seen many clients that have a rental real estate,
Right.
business on the side. That's an affiliate of their company, but it's not making that much money. It's nice, but it's not going to push them over the size standards. So it's fine to have an affiliate, and there's no worries about that at all.
I like that. That's good. Um, Another area that we talked about kind of offline was that you're saying was about private equity and doing acquisitions in the small business arena. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think it sort of happens to be private equity. I don't know if more people are calling themselves private equity, but
Right,
we've
right.
dealt with it in a larger company coming in and wanting to do a partial acquisition, or a company totally transitioning and selling the whole business, or in some cases, private equity coming in and wanting to have a stake. And so that, it's kind of an interesting thing, and it's kind of maybe it's positive for the market. I don't really know that, but again, you have to know what kind of where to draw the lines. So if you have like a 49% owner coming in, that's private equity or really anything, they're probably going to be a large business. You can kind of assume that if they've got, a stake in a bunch of different companies at a certain point, you just kind of assume they're a large business. So they've got to keep their stakes small, but then they also have to in many cases, toe the line on what things they can have a say in, like a veto power in transactions and actions that the company is taking. And then you've got to decide, well, okay, if you're a small business, you may think, well, do you start with just selling a 49% stake and then eventually, you transition, you sell the whole thing, and then, maybe it's no longer a small business anymore, but that doesn't matter at that point. But um, if you're trying to maintain those small business certifications or the socioeconomic certifications, then you have to play by all those same rules. And um, there's actually a list of, well, I've compiled a list. SBA's judges over the years have said, this thing is okay if the minority owner has a veto power over this thing's not okay. So when you're bringing someone in, both sides have to be aware of those rules and kind of how close they can go to the line, how close they want to go to the line, and make sure they're in agreement on those things as they're moving forward on the acquisition.
So if someone is wanting to come in and do an acquisition, what are some of the things they should consider?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, there's going to be maybe some reporting requirements. So you kind of got to be aware of that. Two is you're going to kind of, um, if you're coming in there buying a minority stake, you're going to be kind of handcuffed in what you can do. So like typically you may come in and say, I want to have controls over everything. I want to be able to have a say in everything. And if you're in the small business context, just going in, you have to know, okay, I can't have a say generally over the day-to-day actions of the company. So say it's like a service disabled veteran owned small business. In that context, you've got the small business rules say you can't have a say in kind of the day-to-day actions. And then the SDVSB rules themselves say you're limited in what you can have a say over entirely. So it's even more restrictive in the 8A, women-owned small business, and SDVSB context. So those are two of the major things. I think that the second one's probably more important. It's like you have to take a back seat. You know that SDVSB, that veteran owner, has to be kind of in the driving the whole business and having the final say in a lot of matters, and you have to be aware of all those rules. For instance, you know in the SDVSB context, if you do a change in ownership, you can't get SBA to kind of bless that or give their approval prior to it. You have to notify SBA after the fact. So you have to position it, but knowing that it's still going to be something that SBA reviews after the fact. And if they say, no, you got it wrong, then you have to scramble and try to fix things very quickly, or the SDVSB certification is going to kind of be left hanging out in the wind for a couple months there while you're changing all these things. With the 8A program, that's probably the most restrictive. So if you're looking to buy into an 8A company, you generally need prior approval from SBA. But in some ways, that's kind of nice because then you can kind of run it up the flagpole, have SBA review what the proposed transaction is, and get it all approved. But of course, there's going to be delays there, or it's not going to be an instantaneous type review. It's not like sending it to have your credit score checked and you get it back in a couple of days or overnight, whatever. It can take months for SBA to review those type of transactions, and there's not a good way to force SBA, like with a lot of things in government. There's not a good way to force the government to act more quickly if there's no set deadline in the rule, like there is for approval of a 8A purchase. There's, other than persistence and networking and kind of calling them a lot and having a good rapport with the SBA folks, there's no good way to speed things up.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Um, it's funny when you talked about you could do a change of ownership and they have to notify them after the fact. It reminded me of the IRS. It's like, hey, I did my tax return and they go, you got it wrong. And then they send you a bill. It says, hey, by the way, you owe this money because your bill was wrong. We're like, well, you could have just did it and we could have told me what it was. And,
Oh yeah.
so that's what came to my crazy mind was like, why did they do that to us? But
Well, it's kind of the same concept with we deal with like novation approvals or name
okay.
change approvals. I've been telling my clients this lately. It's almost it can be very frustrating, and so I try to set their expectations. You're basically requesting approval of a contract transfer from one either a contract or the entire business from one entity to another. And it seems like the contracting officers, that's not typically a high priority for them to review those. They've got a lot of stuff on their plate. They're trying to, do procurements, and then someone comes in and say, "Hey, I want to change the name of my company, or I want to change it from a corporation to an LLC," and then you have to get government approval of that for every active contract. And it's kind of hard to incentivize the contracting officers to think, okay, that has to be somewhere on my
At least,
priority list there. It's
right,
like,
right.
yeah, because they've got stuff coming in from every which way, and protests and procurements and market research, all that stuff. And then this one comes in kind of out of the blue, and you say, hey, yeah, approve this. And it's one of those things you got to wait a little bit. So we've been working on quite a few of those lately, and it's a definitely got to have some patience in that game.
Seems like you'll have a patience in this whole game.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, the government wants something fast. They definitely can do it fast, but that's if they want it fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I've noticed that in COVID, we got things done fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it can go fast when you need to. It's just yeah, convincing them of that. And
Convincing them what needs to go fast and what doesn't need to go fast.
but also, yeah, I mean, you can't go in there being too like a bully or anything, because they'll that's if they're already prone to not prioritize, I think that's going to get you the it's not going to really make it go up the priority list. You got to be kind of firm.
That I like that. So tell us, what are some of the other issues right now that are impacting the small business community? I mean, they could be good or bad. Doesn't have to, everything doesn't have to be doom and gloom. There could be some positives as well, right? I'm not leaning towards the negative. I just,
Yeah.
I'm just, hey, every time I'm on a call with an attorney, there's something new happening in this government contract world.
Yeah. Well, this is one that could be, I mean, you could look at it as positive or negative, but it's something I've written about on the blog a little bit here and there. There's been Congress has talked about it, SBA has talked about it, but and I think it's something we talked about a little bit. You know, and we wrote a post about this that you noticed a couple days ago on our blog. Small business dollars are going up, which is very great. And SBA, or federal agencies have met those SBA goals for a lot of different types of procurements, like small disadvantaged business and other areas. And they've missed a few, but then one little trend that keeps getting talked about, and Stephen Coprince, who started our firm and is now kind of a writer extraordinaire on federal contracting. He's noted it. It's that there's less small businesses getting contracts, and I'm sure you've heard about that trend. And
Mhm.
um, you know, there's been executive orders trying to address that. Um, and it kind of ties in. The one part I see a lot, there's many different ways to try and address it. No one know, apparently, if they knew the one solution, they would have done it already. But there's also one thing that some folks have looked at is, okay, there's these very large multiple award contracts. I see, I see in the IT and in services and in other areas like Oasis or CIOSP4, all of these contracts, the larger they get, you kind of worry that it's making it harder for a smaller small business to compete, because often the winners, and I've seen some of this in when you see the list of winners, and like many of them are joint ventures between a large business and a small business. And that's still a small business winning that work and doing that work. But it's harder to compete if you're kind of just starting out. And that could be a reason why there's less small businesses out there, is because there's, the joint ventures are helpful. They're very good for the small business learning from that mentor, learning from that other company that's more experienced. But then you wonder, is that somehow making it harder to compete when there's a giant pool with a lot of different companies competing for spots on a multiple award? It would kind of stand to logic that there's going to be less companies able to get those awards. So it can be like larger small businesses getting more of those awards.
Right.
So again, I don't know if it's kind of bad in the sense there's maybe less small businesses out there, and definitely something people are trying to reverse that trend. There was a OMB memo that I wrote about a couple months ago that it was very like terse language. It was very so do this, do this, do this, do this. One of them was category management, and saying that okay, for new category management, and one part of that is very large government-wide acquisition vehicles and having these really large contracts, and every federal agency can use them. That also has to encourage small businesses. So you have seen that, and it seems like they're trying to make those work with also making more small business awards. So that's the negative is there's less small businesses getting awards each year, and that trend has continued for like 5 years. The positive is they're trying to change the way that the government vehicles work so that they can try to get the best of both worlds, big government-wide vehicle, but also supporting a lot of small businesses. And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out with all these different vehicles.
Oh, it's funny you said there's been executive orders addressing that. Maybe I haven't been looking for them. Is there a reference place I could find some of those executive orders? Because I'd be curious of what they say.
Well, I guess the one I'm thinking of, I wrote a post about it a couple of months ago. It was the Office of Management budget policy memo that
Okay.
was sort of, hey, we're building off of the executive order from before that said we want to increase small business award and increase small disadvantaged business. That was that executive order.
Okay.
Um, oh, you know what I'll do? I can send you that link after, but yeah,
Okay.
that was the one where it said, okay, one other aspect of that was kind of noteworthy is that it said agencies have to apply the small business rule of two for task orders
Hmm.
under IDIQ contracts, and that had been um, kind of a source of there's kind of a split or a divide between how different like the Court of Federal Claims was addressing that issue one way and the GAO was addressing an issue one way. And so agencies kind of said, well, we can kind of pick what we want. If we don't want to do small business set asides for task orders, maybe we don't have to. This OMB memo that came out a few months ago said, no, you have to. Uh, and it was, I mean, I think that may take a little time. There's supposed to be FAR clauses that enact those that aren't out yet, but it said, as of now, you have to interpret it this way. Federal agencies that have to abide by what the OMB says, which is most of them. So that it's hard to gauge how that has impacted, though. You'd think, well, yeah, it's a memo. It's going to every federal agency. They should be abiding by that. It's just hard to get, numbers and anecdotes about how that actually is affecting how federal agencies do their procurements. But it
Yeah.
should be. Yeah.
That makes
I'll,
sense.
I'll definitely I'll send you that one because it's kind of interesting when you see a memo that's most memos are sort of they have a lot of words and then a little bit of action. This one's just it's like a to-do list for federal agencies and how to enhance small business contract. And it's very short. It's just do this one paragraph, then do this, then do this, and it was almost so like the way it was written was so short that it was almost like a call to action. So I'll definitely send you that one because it's interesting. And then again, it didn't have anything really actionable for contractors because it was all direct to agencies, but it should be filtering down for small businesses they're looking for those types of small business set asides. So very interesting. Of course, now
No,
I can't find it. I'm looking through the blog right now. I can't find it, so I'll send it to
I'm
you.
looking at the same time as well. Don't worry. Oh, here it
Just
is. Wait,
just
wait.
scroll through.
I think I have something. I'm looking as well while we're talking.
Yeah, that's
Um,
funny. I'm like,
so
who
don't
can
worry.
who can search the blog? Oh, I found it.
There
Okay,
you go.
January 3rd,
OMB
2020.
command to
Yep.
increase small business participation on Macs.
See, we got like a mind meld here. Yeah,
Hey,
we found it at the same time.
I was looking. Trust me, I was looking for it at the same time. I was looking for it. No, I mean this helps because this is what we do, and we're trying to we want to encourage more participation, and so that's why again what we're doing, pushing out a bunch of free publicly available content, bringing on people like yourself, experts to help guide people in the ways because I think for me. Um, I still believe that there's not enough readily available information on it to help people to
Mhm.
understand this stuff. And so, while I love most people's approach to put it behind paywalls, I don't think that helps encourage more small businesses to participate in these
Yeah,
programs.
that just made me think of something. Well, okay, two things. So one, I will say there is something a little bit actionable on this OMB memo.
Okay.
If contractors see that, for instance, they're looking at a procurement and they see, okay, wait, the federal agency is not applying the rule of two, and then that basically means there's two small businesses that can do the work at a reasonable price, has to be set aside for small business. And they see, okay, well, there's a task order under an IDIQ, agency's not setting it aside for small business. That would be an area where a, a contractor would come in there and say, there's this memo out there. I know it's not in the FAR, but this is kind of a mandate for for contracting officers. So you need to look at that and maybe revise this set aside instead of it being unrestricted. It has to be a small business set aside. So there is areas like that where you can do a Q&A or just send an email to the contracting officer or something like that and say, well, maybe you didn't see it because it was issued in an OMB memo. And I don't know if contracting officers read all of those. Eventually they do, but maybe they always hear that it has to be in a FAR. It doesn't always exist for a contracting officer, but this one I'm sure getting into the FAR will take a few months, if not a year. So that could be an area where contractors send that language to the contracting officer. The other thing that you made me think of was, readily available resources or access to information and not behind a paywall. It's something that kind of circles back to what I was talking about earlier about joint ventures and how popular they are. And so we do a lot of work on those, and everyone always asks, just is there a template out there? Uh, and I said, no, we don't do a template. We can draft it for you as efficiently as possible. And that's an area where you think, okay, is that area where the SBA could um, work on a template? It would take, maybe I don't want them to, it would take away business from our firm and others like ours. But I think the problem is they don't want to have to be responsible if they put out a template because, they change the rules and they got to update the template. What if people have a template from, you know, a
Right.
year or two ago and then they blame the SBA for putting on their website? So that may be the issue there. But they could maybe put a little more information out there on some of these. There's the regulations, but um, sometimes they're a little too dense for people. They just don't want to wade into it. SBA doesn't really have those things in a nice digestible format on their website. I know they got their hands full. They got plenty of stuff to do. Um, so I guess it's good we're out there with the blogs so people can get a little free um, free information that way.
No, I love
Yeah.
it. I really appreciate that. And going back to the SBA doing a template, from my understanding now with joint ventures, though, you can set up a joint venture without having SBA approval.
Yes, that is something new in the last little bit. I mean, there's been kind of a trend for well, okay, so with joint ventures, there's a trend toward less approval by government agencies. It used to be SBA would approve or require approval for 8A joint ventures and all contacts, so in a competitive award, whatever. SBA changed that rule, so it's only a sole source 8A contract requires a review of the joint venture agreement by SBA. It also used to be the case that if you, back when VA was handling the Service and Sale Veteran Small Business Program, VA would review a joint venture agreement prior to being able to bid on a VA SDVOSB set aside. And since that SDVSB program has now been moved over to SBA, they eliminated the requirement for approval of joint ventures entirely. So that's been removed from the regulation, and it makes things a little bit easier. It does mean that the companies themselves have to do a little more homework um, and make sure it's all up to snuff before they submit that. Definitely, I would say one thing on the joint venture, something that I always tell my clients, um, it's got to be filled out completely and specific to the particular contract that they're bidding on. You have to have a somewhat it's somewhat some basic information about what work each party is going to do, what they're going to bring to the table. But you see case after case every couple of months. It seems like there's one where some pretty experienced businesses, they don't fill out that paperwork and they lose out on an award for that reason because they didn't have their joint venture completely filled out. Um,
Mm.
it's sort of the same thing. The joint venture is a little bit more of a creature of the law. So creature of paperwork, you got to make sure you're kind of doing the X's and O's on that before you submit a bid. Same thing that we've seen with like a joint venture. If it's not registered in SAM, then it's not eligible to bid either. So
Mm.
I mean, it's okay once people understand all that. None of those steps in and of themselves are that hard, but there's a little delay for each one, and so they kind of add up to get registered in SAM before you bid. One of our attorneys, Greg Weber, just blogged on a case where, and this is not a joint venture, but just an individual company was not registered in SAM for about one day, for about 24-hour period, at some point between bid submission and award. And after a protest, they were found to be non-eligible and lost that award. So I guess if there's one, one take home, I say some of these rules they try to make them more flexible. SAM registration is not more flexible. That's not the way that rule is going. It's you got to keep it.
I
You got to
agree.
keep that thing up to date throughout the entire period. So you got a joint venture on top of that. I've seen cases on it. I've seen our clients do it. You sometimes it kind of they think, well, both companies are registered in SAM. Why does the joint venture have to be registered as SAM? Um, because it's a separate legal entity, the rules require it to be registered in SAM. So it's kind of there's not any loopholes or ways around that one. That SAM registration is very important and even more so for joint ventures. Yeah.
I did not know that if a registration it went inactive that would be a reason to disqualify someone.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be, yeah, if you weren't registered on the when you submitted, okay, that could
That
kick
makes
you out of the
sense.
competition. But this is, I think they must have slightly updated language in the FAR, and then it's come up in a case both at GAO and Court of Federal Claims, I think, where there was a lapse during the evaluation period, even if it was only for one. In that case, I'm thinking of about one day, and they were working on it. They had submitted the paperwork, all that kind of stuff. Um, but it was a very cut and dried type decision from the I think it was GAO in that case. So that's something we've been putting on the blog and telling people about that. So it's good to spread the word on that. You'd hate for someone. I always feel bad when it's you lose an award based on whatever. There's cost or merits or technical, any of those things. But if you lose it based on one page being not correct or one page being omitted from a proposal,
Right.
those are the ones you feel like, well, the government's not even getting the competition there, and yeah, you feel bad about those. I feel worse about those than if it's a technical thing or something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been in those on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Um, especially if they're an IDIQ multi-year contract where you can't get back on, there's no on-ramp for 5 years. It's like painful.
Well, this OMB memo says do more on-ramps. So maybe that'll be I like it's like it's kind of funny seeing a like a sort of a semi-regulatory thing that just says do more on-ramps.
Can you
Okay.
for the
Be pretty
audience
blunt about that.
who doesn't know what on-ramp is, can you explain what an on-ramp is?
I'd say it's basically the idea that they'll let more companies onto a multiple award contract even after the initial round of awards has gone out, after kind of a set amount of time. Sometimes often it's for the ones I've seen are for small business purposes. Maybe they'll let small businesses back in or have another opportunity to be accepted onto the multiple award contract. I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds good to you?
Sounds good to me. It
Okay.
sounds good to me. I mean, I guess in layman's term is basically when they bid it, it's closed off, and then they allow more people to come on at some point during the process later on. Um,
Yeah.
so that's what they call on-ramp. Basically, they'll say, okay, here's a window of time. More small businesses can apply, even though this is a 10-year long-term vehicle. We're not gonna block people out for 10 years. We're gonna allow a period of time where some more small business can basically apply and be eligible to qualify to get on this vehicle.
Yeah. And this, I mean, this OMB memo says consider on-ramps when developing the acquisition strategy. So again, it's not a requirement, but it is a requirement to consider it. And then it says, limit the off-ramps, especially for small business changing the status. So,
Yeah.
um,
So I mean, again, so that's a small business that went from small to large.
well, yeah, see, that's sometimes when the government does those numbers, they're trying to increase the numbers, and you think, well, it's not a small business anymore, but it's a small business for purposes of the government
Numbers,
counting.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly. So I
yeah,
mean,
that's
that's
true.
not that. So one is helpful. The other one to me feels like it's not helpful because um, now this small business went to large, and they're still allowed to stay on there. So
Yeah,
that to me hurts the new small businesses coming on. But
yeah. I mean, I think they tried to, that's sort of a compromise, I guess. I've seen it,
right,
that they put the 5-year cap. You can basically stay about a small business for 5 years, and then after, if the contract goes over 5 years, then you have to, recertify. And that was kind of I guess, a compromise so that companies didn't have to keep, worry too much about growing and being successful and being victims of their own success. I guess
right.
was the idea there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, as for my
I see your point.
understanding, yeah. Well, and again, listen, I don't make the rules. I don't I didn't vote on the rule. I didn't decide on the rule. I just it's my own interpretation. But also I do have friends that are in that middle market and they say that's no man's land. So you're too large to be small, but you're too small to be large. And so that also is a difficult phase or period for a lot of organizations who exceed that small business cap, but they're not a
Mhm.
multi-billion dollar company. They're not even a billion dollar company.
Yeah,
So um, they're in the hundreds of millions or just shy.
yeah. And some companies reach out to us, and we try to help them brainstorm all the possible legal ways to remain small. But sometimes there's just not any good ones. But that's sometimes where they think, okay, we're going to divest part of the business. We're going to spin off some of the business. Kind of going back to what we were talking about before.
Right.
I've had companies do that. Or the other one that sometimes people don't always realize that is, written right into the SBA rules. It says if you're using a joint venture, the small business only has to capture their percentage of the receipts. They don't have to, so if they were the prime on it, they're stuck with all of those receipts for purposes of small business rules. But if they're a joint venture, they only have to count, 40%, whatever their work share was on a joint venture project. So it's kind of it's also another little incentive to use joint ventures that the SBA put in there. And you can basically subtract your receipts when you're using a joint venture for that portion that is performed by the joint venture partner. So it's a little thing that the SBA wrote in the rules to help with that a little bit. But again, it only helps. Sometimes people are just really, really good and they do really good work, and you kind of feel bad about this. Like, man, there's only a limit to how hard these rules can be pushed.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard on both sides. If you're the government, you're like, hey, we want to promote your growth and your success, and we're happy about that. But then at the same time, we want to encourage more small businesses to come into the programs. So, it's hard on both sides.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when the SBA did a kind of one-time increase to all the size standards, and then we had companies come in and say, "Hey, I've been a small business for a couple of years, and now I am again. So I'm gonna." Is that how this works? I'm like, "Yeah, that's they changed the size standard, so you're now a small business overnight." Uh, and they kind of took advantage of those couple of years they had before they might go back over the limit again. So.
Did they change the rules on the 3-year average? Is it now 3 or 5?
Yeah, that's been a couple of years now.
Right.
It was, well, now it's 5 years.
Is
There was
now it's 5 years,
yeah,
period.
there was
5
like a
years.
transition period. I think it ended in 2022. But
Okay.
for now, yeah, now going forward, it's a 5-year look back period for receipts. And then Congress did the same thing with employee counts a couple years later, and it's now in effect. You look back 2 years to get your average employee counts. It used to be 1 year. Congress, got had the same idea. We're like, let's make it 2 years. The same thing they did or similar thing is receipts. Used to be 3, now they changed it to 5. And it does help, help some businesses, hurt some businesses, but those are the rules that you gotta play with now.
Okay. Yeah, I remember before it was you could choose either 3 or 5.
Yeah, that was the that was like a 2-year period where it was kind of
Right.
yeah, got the best of both worlds, and they
Right.
they cut that off. They didn't let you do it to employees. I'm not sure why. I guess they figured uh, employee companies with a lot with using the employee accounts are generally going to be much bigger anyway, so they,
Right.
they just have to
Right.
deal with it, I guess.
Right. Right.
No
Right. Right.
transition period for you.
Right. 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 Did you
Yeah.
I was just again going through your website. You didn't let me see. I want to be did you put this article together? The one on the recent small GovCon weekend review? Let me see. Did you put that together? It was the one that
Oh,
says GAO overview, understanding waste in federal programs.
oh. Well, yeah, that's always an interesting one. I will be honest, I did not
Okay.
review that one too closely. So, that's kind of on sometimes the weekend review is also a, um, to-do list for me to check up on those things
Collaboration effort.
when I have a little extra
That's
time.
okay. No, no.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I was just looking through it and I was very interested to see
I will say
what the
those
process.
geo reports can sometimes be um, very well written, very um, helpful, and have some good information in them. But there's just so many of them; it's hard to sift through them and find
I
what
know.
is
I'm
relevant
wondering
for
how
your
do they have
purposes.
time to make all these reports?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they got a pretty good group of people there, and they're good at writing reports. So
No, no, they
I like the ones when they go and they, for instance, there's one on like I think it was like Buy American Act waivers. And so they do kind of like a little investigation, and very kind of a light investigation. They reach out, they somehow we picked like 5 agencies and we talked to 10 contracting officers and we asked them how they did this. And then we compiled that into a report. And then it's a very small sample size, but otherwise you don't get that information otherwise. So it's like the only picture you have into how contracting officers are doing certain discretionary things like that on a federal wide basis. And, usually it says like 5 out of 10 of them didn't have a process for that. And you're like, and we recommend they include a process for that. It kind of makes you think, okay, yeah, I think that's kind of like if they did one on novation agreements, they'd probably come to that same conclusion there. So, what's your process for processing novation agreements? We don't have one. They just come in and we look at them. Maybe they could improve that one. That one I'm coming back to that again because I look at that like I think it's from maybe the 80s or something, and it still says, include 3 copies of each form to be sent to the contract officer. I'm like, obviously they don't want that anymore.
Right.
That is one area where you should probably revamp that. I don't know if there's probably not much of there's not a big group of people that want to reform novation requirements, but I guess I'll push for that. So
I'm
I think
sure you won't have any protests.
yeah, I know, but there wouldn't be anybody who really cares about it that much that it could really get a foothold in Congress or wherever it needs to be done. But it's like when a company wants to sell its business, then at that point they're like, God, I wish this was a little faster. I wish it was a little more streamlined, and then they're done and it goes away. But yeah, that's an area where the FAR could be updated a little bit because do you really need every one of those requirements? Obviously, you don't need the 3 paper copies. No one's asked for that in quite a few years, I bet, but it's still in there.
I think it's funny when they talk about someone brought this up to me and we were talking with going back to controls, right? And like you said about the office space and leasing it. And so if they let's say the minority investor, you get to use the office space where they own it or they lease it out. And they said they're supposed to have access to the books, right? And so that's what they're talking about. Like they can't come into the office technically and get access to the books. But I mean, all the books are online now, so no one needs to come into the office to get access
Mhm.
to any books
I know.
anyway. So, like,
I
what
know.
would they be locking you out of by not having you come into an office? Um,
Yeah,
and so it's funny because like everything's online anyways. All your books and everything is on the computer. So I
true.
thought that was pretty funny. So I
Yeah,
said,
I've seen things like that too. Yeah, in the SBA's programs for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah, they've improved. They do improve some of them. The SDVSB program, I noticed they used to have a requirement that you had to live within a reasonable distance of your principal office or something like that, or job site, and they removed that because a lot of people, it'd be kind of weird. They said, well, everyone understands you can work remotely, but the regulation still says that you have to be within a reasonable commute. So if you're more than like an hour away, they'd say you don't control your business and you lose your SDVSP status. Nicely, and it wasn't really a big deal. They took it out. So that was one where you're like, okay, it'd been in there for 30 years though, or however long, 10 years, 10, 20 years. So um, there's some slow, steady progress there.
wow. I didn't know about that one. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Um, well, what other issues that small business be considering, even at a high level, without getting into the weeds? Some other things you talked about team agreements. What are some things with team agreements we should be taking in consideration?
Uh, you know, I one thing obviously, and or maybe it goes without saying, but you should have a teaming agreement. Now, when it comes to enforcement of teaming agreement, I like to think of it. Um, it's more. I think most companies go into it. They're not thinking, okay, I'm gonna sue on this teaming agreement because they can be difficult to enforce, and there's kind of different decisions out there on how much you can enforce it. You think of it more as a kind of a meeting of the minds and almost like a checklist for how things are going to be divided rather than kind of an ironclad type of arrangement. But it's still good to have that, like if the two companies can't agree on the teaming agreement, that's kind of a litmus test for if they're really going to work together at all.
Right.
So it's good to have kind of the basics on paper. I wrote about a case pretty recently where there was a requirement in the solicitation that the teaming agreement indicate the percentage of small business work share that the small business team partner have. And it actually, the company lost the protest and lost the award because they did not follow that specific solicitation requirement. They kind of had I think they said will be, up to 25% small business work by this particular small business, and solicitations that you have to indicate the exact percentage. And so I said, well, up to could be anywhere between 0 and
Right.
25. So
Right.
so yeah, teaming agreements, a lot of times they don't have to be submitted as part of the solicitation, but that's becoming more common that you do see the teaming agreement required to be submitted as part of a solicitation. That case I just mentioned was one example. I saw another solicitation that a client had where it required the teaming agreement to be submitted. So it's becoming more common. Um, so the one was an unrestricted status or an unrestricted procurement. They require the teaming agreement to show your small businesses doing the work. Others could be a small business set aside, and they just want to make sure, if you're teaming with a large business, that you kind of have an enforceable agreement in place. So it's increasingly, I see it, a teaming agreement is good between the parties just to have a meeting of the minds, but it's also sometimes required by the agency. And I guess in the one case I'm thinking of, the agency didn't look at it too closely or kind of, upon protest, they should have looked at it a little bit more closely than they did. Um, and the other area that we work in a lot, and it's been popular for years, but it remains so, is the SBA's mentor protege program. Um, Still very popular, still a good program for often a large business, a more experienced business to partner with a small business. And through that mentor protege program, they don't have to worry about the risk of affiliation um, for assistance that's provided under that mentor protege agreement. And I take a look at the list, SBA publishes a list. There's been 2,000 mentor protege pairings or so that have been approved. So it's very popular. I did see the Department of Defense has their own mentor protege programs, got some different rules. I think they just now released a list, but it's in like there's a couple dozen mentors, or there's maybe 30, 50 mentors. It's designed for much more established, much larger contractors, defense contractors to come in and work with small businesses. But that SBA program, is just a nice framework for companies that want to work closely together and then not have to worry too much about those affiliation risks, like we were talking about earlier in the conversation. And so it's not too hard to get in that program. It doesn't take too long, so the barriers to entry aren't too bad. But it's becoming quite, it's very popular, and I don't see it that changing anytime soon.
Nice. Books. Do you read fiction or nonfiction?
Uh, I do both. I do a lot, I do a lot of like audiobooks, maybe a lot of thrillers and mysteries just to kind of keep my mind off of things.
There you go. Hey, you
Yeah.
know, no, I like that. I like that. Hey, we, what are you looking forward to? Trips, vacation coming up?
I got some fun trips this summer. I'm going to Belize for it's actually my 20th wedding anniversary, so I'm very excited about that.
Wow, Belize. Okay, I've
Yeah.
heard about Belize. I've never been.
I've never been either.
Okay,
My wife and I did the Peace Corps. We were in Jamaica for two years before, maybe like 20 years ago.
is that where you met
And
your wife?
no, we met before then, and then we both decided we wanted the Peace Corps. So
Okay,
yeah, uh, we had a very interesting, very rewarding experience there. And then we haven't really traveled since then. It's like we traveled for 27 months straight, and then we kind of took a break going anywhere. So it's the first time we've gone overseas in quite a long time. So it should be nice. Yeah.
nice, nice, nice. I like it.
Hmm.
If you said you came out of bankruptcy, law.
Yeah.
You know, any other odd jobs or places that you've worked before that people might not think
Uh,
about?
yeah. One of my interesting ones, I used to be a drum teacher and give drum lessons. That was pretty cool. I just
Really?
Yeah, sometimes I had one, some people I'd go to their house and teach them drums, and then that was fun.
So
Yeah,
so
that's a
were you in
fun
a
one.
band or something? Like how did you learn?
Yeah, I used to be. I used to play drums in some different bands, and I did a lot in school, and then I did like in college I did marching band, and then was in some bands, and then um, now it's mainly just like some hand drums here and there. Nothing too organized. This is,
Nothing too
sometimes
organized.
you sit around the fire, play hand drums, that kind of thing. It's
Okay. So you moved from the sticks
relaxing.
to relaxing drums, huh?
Yeah, it's just kind of take your mind off things.
That's
That's
wow.
that's what I need as an attorney. You gotta relax
No,
sometimes.
that's why do you think, again, why we changed up the conversation? We gotta, let's get away from the attorney stuff and get to the
Yeah.
more human side, right? So there you go. Peeps Corps in
Yep.
Jamaica, Belize. I love it.
Yep.
That's exciting. Where are you located? Where are you physically based?
We're in Lawrence, Kansas, outside of Kansas City.
Oh, you're in
Um,
Kansas also?
yeah, yeah.
What are you guys doing all in Kansas? That's where Schoonover's at in Kansas.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because Steve Copra started the firm out here, and then we kind of branched off from there. So that's why we happen to be. There's like kind of a hotbed
Like,
of
what are you
kind
guys
of.
all doing in
I
Kansas? I
so
mean,
we got to be careful. We're going to start pulling all these people out of the Beltway over to Kansas, and then they're going to raise their rents out here. So we got to be careful with that.
yeah, don't do that. They did that in Florida, and I'm gonna tell you, housing prices have tripled over here, and then rents are now out of sight. So yeah, we'll take that out of it. We'll edit that.
Yeah, that's not an invite.
I'm in Northern Virginia, like everybody else, is Chantilly.
We'll keep it a secret. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Now, listen, hey, Shane, I appreciate you today. Why don't you say some closeout words for small businesses? Um, Anything that you could think of that might can help and encourage them in some way, something that you want to leave them with today.
Yeah. Well, the government is always looking for new small businesses. There's programs out there. There's information out there. There's legal opportunities or legal um, mechanisms to encourage small business as well. So take advantage of all of those and kind of use them as kind of tools in your tool belt along with all those great capabilities and supplies and uh, technology, all that kind of stuff that a small business has. Um, Take advantage of these various opportunities, combine them with your own know-how, and we'll see if we can kind of increase those numbers of small businesses and stop that decrease over the next few years.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on today. Happy to have finally met after so many years. So, I did have co-prints on, but I think he had already left the law firm at the time. So,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we see Steve quite a bit all the time since he's out in these parts too. So it's nice
Right.
nice
There you
to
go. So at least I know if I go, I know I could go at where I could get some legal advice. But that's
Yeah, I
so
know, right?
weird to me. I'm like, but you're in Kansas also. All you guys are over there in Kansas. So,
It is kind of funny, but it's I mean it's a good
it's a
place to
thing.
live
It's a
and now
real
you can
thing.
do all these things remotely and you just kind of just fly into DC on those limited times when you really have to and
Maybe,
it's pretty good.
maybe you and your wife will end up staying in Belize.
Yeah, I mean that's the next thing. Get some put some offices elsewhere.
There you go. Then you could be like, "Hey, Eric, I'm in Belize. Where'd you think I was? Kansas." You
Very
know,
nice.
nice. Well, Shay, listen, thank you, sir. I appreciate you for coming on today. It's
Yeah.
a pleasure. Uh, and I'm happy that you've got a personality for attorney, which is great.
Oh,
You know,
great talking to you.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
love doing
sir.
it.
No,
Appreciate the
I enjoy
opportunity.
so. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Take care. Enjoy
All
your
right.
weekend. Okay. Bye now.
Thank you.